Night terrors. They were not like nightmares. No, they were something far worse, far deeper, far more insidious. Nightmares could be shaken off, could be rationalized in the light of day. But night terrors, they lived in the bones, in the sinew, in the very marrow of the mind. As I lay there, staring into the darkness, my body felt, primed, every muscle, every tendon seemed to tighten with the same focus, the same readiness as a gladiator stepping into the arena. I had watched such men in films before, sinewy and strong, their faces hard as stone, readying themselves for battle. The way they prepared, with such careful precision, had always struck me as familiar. But what for them was a preparation for combat? For me, it was a preparation for the night. Yes, I too readied myself. My breath slowed, my heart beat steady, though my mind raced ahead into the abyss of what lay beyond the walls of sleep. I was a soldier, preparing for war, though no battlefield awaited me. No sword, no shield. Just the terror, lurking somewhere beyond my consciousness, waiting for its moment to strike. It always came. It was a certainty as sure as death itself. Night terrors. They are not like dreams, nor are they like the fleeting horrors of a nightmare. No, they are something far more sinister, more primal. They do not merely frighten. They rend the soul from the body. They grip you by the throat, make your heart pound as though the very air you breathe has been poisoned. And they come without warning, without reason, creeping into the folds of sleep with quiet menace. The things you see during a night terror, they could be harmless in the daylight, benign even. A tree, its branches swaying in the wind. The whisper of autumn leaves as they drift across a meadow. The sound of distant footsteps on a forgotten path. But in the darkness, in the grip of the terror, those things become monsters of the mind. Oh, how they invoke such fury, such violent fear. The mere rustling of those autumn leaves upon the ground could invoke within me a sensation so profound, so overwhelming, that it felt as though I was being prepared for some gruesome fate. Crucifixion, perhaps, or worse. My heart would pound in my chest, my pulse echoing in my ears as though the world itself were closing in on me. That was the power of the night terror. It turned the mundane into the monstrous. It took the soft sounds of nature, the benign whispers of the wind, and twisted them into instruments of fear. It was as though the very air had conspired against me, as though the world itself had been remade into a labyrinth of horrors from which there was no escape. And the worst part, you could not even scream. No matter how intense, no matter how fierce the terror, you were paralyzed, trapped in your own body, your mouth sewn shut by the invisible hand of fear. You could thrash, you could sweat, you could feel your heart racing to the point of breaking, but you could not scream. This was not the stuff of nightmares. Nightmares, after all, could end. But night terrors, they clung to you, wrapped themselves around your mind like a vice, and did not let go. Even after they passed, even after the dawn had broken, their residue lingered, an invisible scar, a wound that could not be seen but was felt in every nerve, every shuddering breath. It had been days since last I slept. How many? I could no longer tell. Time, that once orderly procession of hours and minutes, had become a blur, a meaningless stream that flowed around me while I remained unmoved by its passing. The world itself had grown, muted. Colors seemed less vibrant, sounds less sharp. There was no urgency left in anything, no pressing need, no stress. The things that might once have roused my attention, the petty conflicts and demands of the waking world, now seemed laughable in comparison to what I faced each night. I watched as the teachers, the principals, the parents, attempted to wield their authority, as though their raised voices and stern glares could pierce the fog that enveloped my mind. A teacher, red-faced and fuming, droned on about some infraction or other. I could see the veins bulging at his temples, the spit forming at the corners of his mouth as he lectured, as though his words carried weight. But what was his anger to me? Did he not realize how little his threats meant in the face of what I endured? What could he possibly do to invoke fear in someone who faced horrors each night that he could not even begin to comprehend? And then there were the principals, so proud of their authority, so assured of their ability to mete out discipline. They sat behind their desks, fingers steepled, voices low and measured as though they held the keys to my salvation. They spoke of consequences, of punishments. I listened to their words as one might listen to the droning of a distant radio faint, indistinct, barely worth the effort of comprehension. Did they not understand? Did they truly believe that their rules, their detention, their threats of expulsion could compare to the nights I faced? Could they fathom the terror that awaited me each time the sun dipped below the horizon? How quaint, how utterly ridiculous their attempts to intimidate seemed in the light of what I knew. And the parents, oh, the parents, their voices were always the most insistent, the most shrill. They demanded obedience, respect, as though their very lives depended on it. I watched as they scolded, as they gave their ultimatums, their expressions twisted with frustration. But it was all so absurd. They, who had no knowledge of the true nightmares that plagued my nights, who had never stared into the abyss as I had, how could they believe that their anger, their disappointment, would have any effect on me? I almost pitied them. These poor souls who thought their threats of punishment could instill fear in one who lived in the darkest depths of horror, night after night. Had they no idea of the trials I had endured, the battles I fought in the silence of my room, alone against the terrors that lurk just beyond the edge of sleep? No, they did not. They could not. For the fear they sought to inspire in me was but a pale shadow of the fear I knew so well. How could they hope to threaten me when I had faced the Sandman himself? When I had wrestled with the horrors of the night, my body paralyzed, my mind screaming in terror. What could their anger do to one who had already been stretched to the limits of human fear, steeped in nightmares so dark, so profound, that daylight itself seemed a fleeting illusion? None of that matters now. None of them matter. It has been days since I last slept, and yet, even with my nerves frayed, my stomach twisted in knots, my body shaky and unsteady, I do not welcome him. The Sandman will come, of that I am certain, but he will not bring rest, no, not for me. For me, he brings only horrors, wrapped in the guise of sleep, taunting me with the promise of peace before plunging me into deeper nightmares. The nights have grown long, the shadows heavy with menace, and as I lie here, waiting for what I know must come, I can feel the weight of it bearing down on me, the terror that awaits. I have no choice but to endure it. Yet even now, knowing what is to come, I do not surrender to sleep. For what waits for me in the darkness is worse than any exhaustion, any sickness of the body. The nightmare comes quietly at first, as they often do. No grand entrance, no sudden terror, just the slow, creeping realization that I'm no longer in my bed. I am standing now, enclosed within a small glass box. An elevator, if you could call it that, though its transparency serves no purpose other than to mock me. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, they are all made of glass, clear and unyielding, trapping me within their confines. And outside the world is dark. the glass descending slowly into what seems to be the deep black earth, as though I am being lowered into the very belly of the underworld. I press my hands against the glass, searching for an escape, but there is none. The walls are too thick, too solid, too cold. I am powerless here, a prisoner to the descent, watching as the earth closes in around me, the darkness pressing against the glass as though to swallow me whole. But the worst of it, the grotesque and maddening part, is not the descent itself. No, it is what I see just beyond the glass, drifting like some spectre through the void. A corpse. She wears a wedding dress, pale and tattered, her face obscured by a veil that clings to her lifeless form. She moves slowly, unnaturally, her body caught between the earth and the glass, as though the very ground is dragging her down. Yet she remains pressed against the walls of my prison, a constant mocking presence. Her eyes, though I cannot see them through the veil, I know they are watching me. The dead do not rest in this place. They linger, they haunt, they torment. I scream, but no sound escapes. I beat my fist against the glass, but it does not shatter. The descent continues, slow, methodical, inevitable, and always, always she is there, floating just beyond my reach, her corpse forever bound to this hellish descent, as though mocking my futile attempts to escape. And then, with a start, I awake. The terror lingers, even as I blink away the remnants of the dream. My heart races, my breath comes in shallow gasps, and for a moment I'm still trapped in that glass box, the image of the corpse burned into my mind. But I'm awake. I'm here, in my room, safe, or so I tell myself. I sit up, the weight of the nightmare still pressing down on me, and as I have done so many times before, I reach for it. That small, unassuming book, the book of manners. Even now, so much older, so much wiser, I find myself reaching for the same comfort I sought as a child. The words, the simple lessons of civility, offer a strange sort of balm for my mind, though they cannot erase the horrors that cling to the edges of my consciousness. I sat there skimming over the familiar words of the Book of Manners, but the tremors would not stop. My body shook, racked by the aftershocks of the terror that had gripped me. And no matter how tightly I clenched my fists, no matter how deeply I breathed, I could not steady myself. For hours I trembled, my muscles twitching uncontrollably, my teeth chattering as though chilled by a winter storm. But it wasn't the cold. No, it was something deeper, something that gnawed at my core and refused to let go. I turned the pages, my eyes scanning the simple text, though none of it truly registered. Manners, civility, decorum. How quaint those things seem now. How far removed from the battle I fought each night. The words might have offered comfort once, long ago, but now they were a poor shield against the forces that plagued me. The tremors continued as my mind wandered, drifting back to the countless lectures, the endless reprimands from teachers, principals, and parents. Their scornful words echoed in my mind, their accusations of my failures, my lack of concentration, my lack of effort. They had always demanded more from me, more attention, more obedience, more compliance. But what did they know? I could almost hear their voices now, smug in their righteousness, so sure of their authority. They would be pleased to know, I thought bitterly, that my efforts would now double. They had always wanted me to focus, to apply myself, to become the perfect student, the perfect child. Well, they would have their wish, but not for them, not for their praise, not for their approval. No, my efforts would double for one reason, and one reason only. The Sandman, He had gone too far this time. The horrors he had unleashed upon me were no longer mere inconveniences of sleep, no longer passing fears that could be shrugged off in the daylight. No, this was war, and I would not allow him to win. I would concentrate. I would learn everything I needed to know, not for the teachers, not for the principals, not for the parents who scorned me and my failures. I would do it for me, for my vengeance, for my victory. The Sandman was my true foe, the only one who mattered in the grand scheme of things. His cruelty, his torment, had become my singular focus, and I would stop at nothing to rid myself of him, to free myself from the prison he had constructed around my nights. Those petty authority figures, they were nothing, mere distractions. But him, he was the one who had turned my life into this endless struggle. My true enemy. Fuck the Sandman. I can say that now. I'm older. I just turned 16 and practically an adult of my own. Even my own body had turned against me, as though the war I waged each night were not enough. Now the very flesh I inhabited had decided to betray me. The pain in my side, sharp and unrelenting, was the final treachery. My appendix, they said. It had to come out. Surgery was inevitable. It seemed fitting, in a way. That my body, too, would rebel. That even the organs that sustained me would join the forces aligned against me, as if the scars of war were beginning to appear from the ethereal battlefield I fought on. There was no escape. No peace. Not even within my own skin. The buzzing voices around me, so full of concern, grated on my already frazzled nerves. The fake smiles, the empty platitudes of comfort. It was all a charade. They didn't understand, couldn't possibly fathom the real battle I faced. They came with their cards, their hollow gestures of well-wishing, as though a few words scrawled on paper could somehow ease the dread that gnawed at my insides. Get well soon. You're in our thoughts. You'll be fine. Empty words. Meaningless. They spoke of recovery, of healing, but they had no idea what truly awaited me. It wasn't the knife I feared. The sharp edge of the surgeon's blade held no terror for me. What was a mere cut compared to the horrors I faced every night? No, it wasn't the surgery that haunted my thoughts. It was the sleep. The forced, inescapable sleep. The anesthesia, they called it. A gentle drifting into unconsciousness, they said. But to me, it was nothing short of a prison. They would put me under, would force me into that dream world, and I would have no say in the matter. No control. No way to fight it. And that was what terrified me. In my own bed, at least, I could brace myself. I could prepare for the horrors that waited on the other side of sleep. But in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by the hum of machines, by the cold efficiency of the surgeons, I would be helpless. I would be plunged into the darkness, into the world of dreams, without warning. Without the time to steel myself for the battle that awaited. What nightmares would the Sandman bring me there? What horrors lurked in that sterile abyss, waiting for the moment my consciousness slipped away? I wasn't afraid of the surgery. I wasn't afraid of the knife. But I was terrified of the sleep, of being thrown into the fray without my armor, without my defenses. To face the Sandman on unfamiliar ground, in a place that was not my bed, not my battlefield. It was an unimaginable terror. The cards, the well-wishers, the concerned looks of those around me. They were all blind to the truth. Their words meant nothing. How could they? They had no understanding of what it meant to face the dark, to fight it tooth and nail, night after night. They worried about the knife, about the wound that would heal in days. But I feared the sleep, the battle that would rage while my body lay still. cut open and vulnerable. They couldn't see it, but the real war was not in the hospital. It was in my mind. There's no time to wallow. Even with the odds stacked against me, I will fight. I have fought before countless times. And while I may not emerge victorious in every battle, I am no longer the helpless child I once was. Years of battling in the shadows have taught me that I am not powerless, not completely. There are tricks to be learned, rules to follow in the darkness. Yes, even the nightmares themselves have their limits. There are some dreams that can be bent to my will. They start as nightmares, yes, but I have learned how to seize control, how to turn the fear into something more manageable, more malleable. If I focus, if I remain calm, I can sometimes twist the fabric of the dream itself. The darkness is not entirely without rules. And then there are those that can be escaped. The ones that leave doors, tiny cracks in the dreamscape that, if prepared for, can serve as exits. I have spent years creating mental exit strategies, ways to slip through the cracks of a nightmare before it tightens its grip. A bottle of pills, perhaps. A quick escape. It seems simple, even laughable to some. But in the moment, that small, convenient exit can mean the difference between succumbing to terror and waking with breath in my lungs. I have used this trick before. In the dream, you convince yourself, just take the pills, just slip away. And in the next moment, you are free. But that will not work this time. No, escape is not an option now. The thought is interrupted by the knowledge of where I am. What awaits me beyond the dream? If I slip away from the nightmare too soon, if I force myself to wake, I could awaken to something far worse. Surgery, the cold, sterile touch of a hand reaching into my body while I am still conscious, still aware. The possibility of such a horror makes this form of escape unthinkable. There must be another way. I remind myself that I am not without options. Even when the nightmares become their most grotesque, their most suffocating, there are still moments, brief, fleeting moments, when control can be seized, if only for a moment. It is in those moments that the rules shift, that I can wrest some power from the darkness. I can't escape the nightmare, not without falling into a worse one. But I can fight. I can take hold of the dream and bend it to my will, if only for long enough to keep myself from drowning in it. And so I prepare. There is no time to cower in the corners of my mind, no time to hide from the battle that is to come. The Sandman will come for me, that much is certain. But I will not be his helpless victim. Not this time. I will fight him, even here, even in this hopeless scenario. I have learned enough. I have suffered enough. The night will not take me without a struggle. As the wheels of the gurney rolled beneath me, their rhythm steady and unyielding, I knew what awaited me. It was not the surgery itself that stirred my thoughts, but the inevitable descent into sleep, into the darkness, into the place where my true battle would be fought. The sterile lights overhead flickered as we passed beneath them, each one casting its cold, indifferent glow upon me as though to signal the arrival of some inescapable fate. I could feel the weight of what was to come settling in my chest, heavy and oppressive, like the slow tightening of a noose. But I was ready. Whatever suffering was to be visited upon me, whether by the surgeon's hand or by the Sandman's, would not be met with submission. No, I would endure, and whatever pain they dealt, I would pay back in kind. They had no power over me that I did not already possess. I had prepared myself for this. I had fought too long and too hard to let them believe I was a victim, helpless and cowering. The horrors that awaited me, both in waking and in sleep, would be met with defiance. A nurse leaned over me, her face obscured by a mask, her voice calm, detached. "Count backwards from 10, she said, as though the words held no significance beyond the routine. But to me, they were more than a command. They were the opening salvo, the signal that the cage was about to be opened and the wild beasts unleashed. I could see it in my mind, as vividly as if it were playing out before my eyes, the image of the gladiators, standing tall in the sand, awaiting the moment when the bars would lift and the animals would be set upon them. They too were ready. The air in the room felt thick, oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in around me. The lights above glared down with harsh indifference, their sterile glow casting long shadows that seemed to creep along the edges of my vision. But I did not flinch. I did not cower. I would count. I would obey. But it was not an act of submission. No, it was a declaration of my readiness. 10. I closed my eyes, the darkness settling over me like a shroud. The hum of the machines in the background became distant, a mere murmur in the vast expanse of my mind. My breathing slowed, deliberate, measured, as if preparing for the plunge into the unknown. 9. The cold air of the operating room brushed against my skin, a reminder of the world I was about to leave behind. But it was no more than a passing sensation, an echo of the present that would soon be swallowed by the dream. 8. I could hear the faint whisper of the nurses, the clink of instruments being prepared. But they were of no consequence now. I was on the edge, teetering between waking and sleep, between the known and the abyss. 7. The cage was opening. The beast was stirring, claws scraping against the bars, eager for release. But I was not afraid. I had prepared for this. I had fought before, and I would fight again. 6. The world began to fade, the edges of my consciousness fraying like threads pulled too tight. The Sandman's grip was closing in, but I would meet him head-on, just as I had every night before. 5. And so I counted. Not as a prisoner being led to the gallows, but as a gladiator stepping into the arena. I would face whatever nightmares lay in wait, and I would fight. 4. And then nothing. And when I say nothing, I truly mean nothing. Not darkness, not the quiet hum of sleep, not the flicker of distant dreams. No, there was simply nothing. It was as though the moment I had reached the number 4, the world ceased to exist. I had expected the Sandman. I had braced myself for the battle, prepared for the onslaught of nightmares that would come crashing down upon me the moment I let my guard slip. I had felt the cages opening, the wild beasts waiting to tear into me. But then, nothing. Not even a whisper of fear. No horrors, no torment, no thrashing in the depths of sleep. It was as if I had simply ceased to be. I opened my eyes and there I was, in the hospital bed, the sterile room, the soft beeping of the machines, the faint light of morning filtering through the window. How long had it been? Minutes, hours, I could not tell. It was as though time itself had folded in on itself, and all that remained was the space between the opening of my eyes and the moment I had closed them. Confusion washed over me, thick and heavy, pressing against my chest. Why had the Sandman not come? Why had I been spared his wrath? There had been no battle, no fight for my sanity, no grasping at the edges of my mind as I slipped into the abyss. There had been nothing, but why? I had spent so long fearing the descent into sleep, the moments when consciousness fled and the nightmares took hold. I had expected the same here, in the sterile cold of the operating room. But instead of the wild chaos of the night terrors, there had been peace. Silence, glorious nothingness. I lay there, the beeping of the machines a distant hum in the background. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt comforted. There had been no Sandman, no twisted creatures lurking in the shadows, no grotesque mockery of life dragging me down into the depths of sleep. Only the void, empty and pure. And it was beautiful. How glorious, how comforting to know that there could be something other than terror on the other side of sleep. Complete annihilation of fear, of consciousness itself. I had always believed that sleep was merely a gateway to the nightmares, a doorway that led to my own personal hell. But here, there had been no door, no passage, only a vast unbroken expanse of nothing. For the first time, I had been spared. And in that sparing, I realized something profound. The key to my victory was not in battling the Sandman head-on, but in denying him the battleground altogether. Anesthesia. That was it. That was the key. The Sandman's Achilles heel. The one weapon I had at my disposal that could annihilate him completely. It was not a fight I needed to win through sheer force of will, but through the absence of will itself. Anesthesia had stripped me of my defenses. Yes, but it had also stripped the Sandman of his power. He had no hold on me when I was truly, utterly gone. I smiled then, a small, quiet smile, as the realization settled into my bones. I knew what my weapon was now. All I needed was to learn how to wield it.